to another episode of Firewall, and I couldn't be more excited because I get to interview someone who, in my opinion, is the place that I could go to, you know, for my ministry. Where do I park myself? I remember I got a word once from a New York pastor. He said to me back in the day, he said, "Pastor Wall, now you need to really bring this boat you've got into somebody's port that's big enough to handle it." I think it was just giving me a word of warning when I was younger that I was going to need somebody who would be a friend but speak the truth when I needed it. I want you to meet that prophetic apostolic friend. It is Rick Joyner. And Rick, I've been ordained with you guys for years now. And so if anybody has problems with me, they should really talk to you.
Well, you know, I don't know if I have enough time for all of them, but bring as many as you can.
Thank you. I'm going to take that out of the program because I know people start sending you mail. All right, so
Yeah.
so you've been prophetically on the front lines of what's going on in the United States. I mean, I would say for a long time, and your perspective on what's happening now, it's kind of funny because you sounded a bit like an alarmist during the Obama administration. You introduced me to people like Nuttall and Boykin, and man, I got an education on America and dynamics of ideas, but it seemed as though back then I was an alarmist and nothing was there to be alarmed about. But now the clock is coming back. It's like Churchill. Now everything Churchill was warning about looks like it's coming about. So with that thought in mind, would you say that what you've been saying for years is now coming around to manifestation? Or where are we on the time clock of the things you've been talking about?
Well, I have been warning about some of these things since 1987 when I wrote them in a book called The Harvest. But yeah, I believe we see things unfolding. Actually, for a long time, I wondered if they were going to happen in my lifetime. Now I'm wondering if they're going to happen before the year's out. You know, I think things have been speeding up lately. And you know, it is true. I've been sounding the alarm. And of course, you know, alarms to be effective have to be annoying. You know, beautiful music doesn't wake me up in the morning. It puts me deeper to sleep, you know. I've been kind of one of those irritants for a long time. Nobody wanted to hear, and I understand it, you know, fully good. And it did seem like this is crazy. This is bizarre. This is never going to happen in our country. Now things are picking up so much speed. They're happening so fast that I am deeply alarmed myself.
Yeah.
Saying, Lord, we got to catch up. We got to get ahead. I thought I was preparing all this time. But, you know, there's, you know, I think it's going to be a constant challenge from now until the King returns. But that's a good thing. That is definitely a good thing. I think it's, you know, as one of the Chinese dialects, the same word for crisis is the same word for opportunity. I think this is the opportunity to see us reconnected and remoored to our constitutional foundations in this country, which I believe we're divinely inspired. I believe education has been totally off the rails, getting worse and worse. And I think it's a chance for a reset in basic education, many other fields and things that are going on. But there is looming increasing conflict.
Yeah.
And,
Go ahead.
you know, I think we're in the spiritual war. We've been in it all along. We've never been out of it. It's always, you know, the whole earth lies in the power of the evil one. We're at war spiritually, but now we're seeing it unfolding in every other realm, the social realm, the moral, the economic, the, you know, basic morality. I mean, everything, which is connected to the spiritual realm. But we're seeing, I think, conflicts and challenges on every level like I don't think we've seen before, maybe on planet Earth ever. I mean, it's truly the mature darkness and deep darkness that Isaiah 60 talks about. But at the same time, that's when we look for the glory of the Lord to appear. So it's the ultimate clash between light and darkness. And as we see there, the light wins. We know that. But we've got to fight. We are in a war. The Lord is a warrior. He said that. He came the first time as the lamb. He's coming back as the lion. And we've got to get to know that side of his nature. He's coming back with a rod of iron. And the preparation for that, we're told in Isaiah and other places how to prepare the way for the Lord. And this is what we're doing now. This is what his people are engaged in doing. We're supposed to be the light and the salt.
And I was thinking today when I got up about the apostles when they were beaten in the presence of those Pharisees, and they departed rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer. And the Lord just ran that by my mind, because I said, Lord, I only know, I got a 30-fold revelation of that in terms of when your rights are trampled on, when you're being abused, to be able to reframe that and say, wow, I get to do this? It's a different shift rather than outrage and revenge. It's that you allowed me to be able to step in that role. There's something about the idea of counted worthy to suffer that I think we have to reframe as we are in battles, so that we don't look at casualties so much as losses or setbacks as battles lost. It could just be that God in his own strange way is allowing us to participate in something, and it's a privilege to be able to get used in that way. And so, you got any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's called basic Christianity. Take up your cross daily. Follow him. Love not our lives unto the death. If we seek to save our lives, we'll lose them. But if we lose them for his sake, we find them. And so I think we have to have a mentality where we are, this day could be our last day on earth. And if we live that way, if you think about it, you knew this was going to be your last day on the planet. You died of self, you died of everything. But the main things that are going to be your focus are the true innermost living waters of your heart. I mean, that's what the prayer of Jesus was in John the last night. You will focus on what's important. And, people that know they're going to be executed or whatever the next day, they say they get a focus that is like living life on a level they've never lived before. Well, living the true Christian life, the life of the cross, I believe we'll have that kind of focus daily and live life to the fullest every day, whether it happens that day or not, but where we live every day that way. And yet we also learn to live with vision and strategy for the future, preparing the way for the Lord.
I want to talk about that, and we'll take a quick break right now so that I can address the folks here that are watching us about what we're doing and people that are joining us a little bit late. And so we'll be right back.
As a pandemic wreaks havoc and angry mobs burn our cities, Lance Wallnau explains why this is happening and takes you into the ancient text he describes as God's Chaos Code. This is the exciting sequel to Lance's best-selling book, God's Chaos Candidate, where he predicted Donald Trump would be president. God's Chaos Code predicts this exact moment in history and what is coming next.
When you're in the midst of shaking and uncertainty, the one thing that can give you confidence is knowing what God has said about the time that you're in. If the Lord tells you ahead of time what's going to happen, you can be certain things are going to be working out. The Lord has given us that code in the Bible. He's told us what's coming in America, what's coming to the nations. He's literally given us the chaos code. We can understand what's happening and be awakened in the midst of it. You need to understand and get this chaos code.
You need to know the code. Order God's Chaos Code now at godschaoscode.com.
All right, welcome back. And we've got my special guest, Rick Joyner, who is By the way, Rick, is it correct that I think Pennington told me that you are listed as one of the top 20 Christian authors of all time in terms of volumes of works read? Have you been given that YouTube award yet?
I don't know. I don't even keep up with stuff like that. I did get some kind of plaque or something said one of my books made the all-time top 40 bestsellers. That wasn't just Christian books. That was all. But I don't know, who are the people rating these things? I don't know how legitimate it is, but yeah, I've heard of some things like that.
Well, it must be true. I think when you're in the top 40 for all categories, that would be which one? That was the Final Quest?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was fun. That was years ago. I don't even know what I did with that plaque.
Well, so earlier on, you were talking about a vision or a dream that you had, and that was when I didn't want to start. I wanted to catch it for the program because you and I were just talking before the broadcast. I thought, oh, my people are going to love to hear it, and it was about where we're at now and what you saw coming. So let's pick it up there about that dream or vision that you had. Do you remember which one we're talking about?
Well, now you're talking about the one I had about the coming Civil War and
Yes.
Revolution.
Yes.
Yeah, that I had in December of 2018. I had an aspect of that back in 1987 and several other what I call installments, but the clear vision and experience I had in 2018 was I was shown U.S. history from heaven's perspective. And it was a very different perspective than I had. And I've been studying U.S. history for 50 years, and to some degree, but history, from heaven's perspective, they did not consider that we had won the Revolutionary War, or the War for Independence. They thought the real purpose of that war was to establish a nation where there's liberty and justice for all. And when, it wasn't just about getting free from, British rule. It was being that place. And when we did not establish that place, it was more like freedom and justice for some. Didn't include the blacks, the slaves, and many whereas. So that required a civil war, a far bloodier, far worse war, to rectify the things that were not accomplished in our destiny by the first revolution, which was also our first civil war, if you understand it. But the Civil War didn't accomplish everything either. We would not have needed a civil rights movement. We're still falling short of everyone being treated as equal, created equal and having equal rights under the Lord and with liberty and justice for all. There's still a lot, and these things are going to keep coming up until they're dealt with. But what I was shown, it was like a huge screen, like a cinema screen, but it was something different. But I saw, as I started walking from left to right, I could look back in our history from the left, and the further I walked to the right, I could come right up to the present. So I started walking to see where we are now. And when I got to the end, there were these fiery, flaming words written that they said the second American Revolution / Civil War is inevitable, it is right, and it will be successful. And that was the end. And then I've tried to go back and fill in the pieces. How was heaven seeing things so differently that we tend to from our earthly perspective? And even the whole first part of the dream was about these serious champions of the spirit, champions of the faith that are going to be raised up to bring down strongholds and are going to deal with some of the ultimate issues of our time and how they're going to know their purpose and destiny to do this. Things like that. It was pretty comprehensive. I've written about it a lot in our Morning Star Journal and some of our Word for the Week that I put out on the internet and everything. But I'm still getting some insights into that. Now, I saw an aspect of this coming. We see in part, we know in part. Nobody has a whole picture. But for many years, Bob Jones used to tell me about a coming second American Revolution. I mean, for many years, he would talk about this. And I believed him because I'd seen an aspect of it in that vision I'd had in 87. But he kept talking about how many things are going to parallel the first revolution. For instance, he said the second American Revolution is going to begin in earnest physical warfare in the same way that the first revolution began. He said, when they come for the guns, that's what's going to start the fight. And he said, just like in the first revolution, the message went forth from the church that the enemy is coming. The enemy is marching. Remember Paul Revere and Land 2 if by sea, and all that. But he said the church is going to give the message, and we're going to know, and that's what is going to start the real earnest battles of the Second American Revolution, is when they come for our guns.
Wow.
And of course, that's what started the battles of Lexington and Concord, when the British marched to seize the armories of the militias there. So I've always, I get a little jittery when they start talking about increasing gun control, because, not so much about the guns as I know this marks something I still think we have a ways to get ready for.
Yeah, you mean we have a period of time before that, or you think that we have a whole lot of preparing we haven't done?
I think the latter. I think we do yet have some time, but things are happening so fast now that we can't waste any time in preparing. And through a lot of other dreams and experience I had, I think the Lord gave me a pretty good strategy for how to prepare, physically, mentally, spiritually, all of these things which we've been trying to do ourselves, and I think getting a lot done. But
so listen, let's talk about how people can get a hold of that. So if they want to be able to catch up on what you're saying on these things, where would they go?
Well, I've been putting them out in mostly our Morning Star Journal, which is available. We have an e-journal that is available. They can go to our website, Morning Star Ministries. They can get that. I've been putting it out for years on the Word for the Week I put out on the internet. People can sign up for free and get that Word for the Week.
Good.
Or go to our website and get it. I've been putting it out, honestly, every way I could, through television programs that we've done here called Prophetic Perspectives. I've done it in our church services. And, I have felt a tremendous burden that we have to, share the whole message of this life. And to me, that is the main part of the preparation. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is always spiritual. We tend to default with, what do I do with my IRA? The physical, that is the least of our worries right now. And, but those are concerns, and those are things that God has made us stewards of, and we want to do the best job we can with those. So I'm not belittling them, but we keep the main thing. We've got to be getting closer to the Lord. I tell you, if we're not getting much closer to Him personally, I don't care how much we understand what is going to happen, even when and where, we can still be so far out of His will that we're in serious jeopardy ourselves. We followed the Lamb. As our friend Francis Frangipan used to say, we're not called to follow a manual, we're called to follow Emmanuel, a person.
Yeah.
So, and I try to see, in everything I'm sharing, the great majority to be the main things, the most important parts, but also practical things. What do we do to get ready for food, water, things like this? We've been talking about this for years. And now we're doing it. A lot of people, I started talking 10 years ago. I told people, whenever you go to the store, buy an extra couple of cans or something, put it in some storage or whatever where it's available, food like that. Well, and then after 5 years, I said, you better start buying 4 to 6 cans because time is getting shorter. right now, you know, if you're seeing the signs, we're on the verge of a major food shortage right here in this country. There are things like, you know, some people heard that 10 years ago, they got plenty. They got enough for their neighbors too. And, but some that are just getting started, I'm going to say, you better go fill up. You better go get ready. I'm not trying to create any kind of panic or anything, but we're going to have a lot of challenges like that too.
Okay, all right, let's go down a practical checklist. So you want to be able to have your food supply so that it's you, and then you got to think about your kids and your family that aren't listening and doing the same. So everything you've got is going to be, you know, the moment you have, like I got my kids here in Texas. So then if something happens, it's not me and Annabelle here in Homestead anymore. So
Right.
it's now I got to think in terms of tribe. What else are practical considerations for a revolution, civil war period of time?
Well, I think we're going to have to deal with power outages. We're going to have to deal with shortages of things that get delivered because there's going to be disruption of transportation from time to time, not everywhere, not every time, but in some places and sometimes. I mean, if you think about the last Civil War, only about 1% of the population was engaged in battles. And they were only taking place in these little battlefields remotely, maybe 1% of the territory. The rest of the country, it's business as usual. Stock market kept going up, everything else, and it's going to be a lot of the same. But in some places, it's going to be, I can say this, especially in cities, which I think we're already seeing. It's getting dangerous. It's going to get far more so. We have the police being basically crippled and disarmed, and we're being set up for some terrible things to happen in our cities.
I have a question about that, and you could help me. It seems to me like the police getting, and the recruitment is lousy, morale is lousy. Who wants to be a policeman when your mayor's not backing you and when your life is in danger, et cetera? But while the framing of this from the left makes it seem like, you heard Joe Biden at the debate the other night say the absurdity that Antifa is an idea, as though it's not actually hitting people and burning things. So it's kind of like a bizarre thing. They are a militia. They're never called a militia. I am shocked that no one's used the word yet. These guys are the radical brown shirt, frontline, street thugs. They are the militia of the Democrat Party or of the left, loosely tied so that nobody could say they're there, but they always seem to be showing up on all those causes. The only time I hear the word militia is if it's right-wing extremists who evidently, aren't doing anything. They're not burning anything down. But the moment something happens, it's always right-wing militia, right-wing extremists. Isn't it probable that we're looking at militias on the left already, not being called that, and that there are militias forming, including cops that are working with their local communities and volunteers that are seeing these things coming, ex-military saying, man, if they're coming into my neighborhood, here's what I got to do. Is that happening?
Yeah, definitely happening. And it needs to happen. Now, militia, as you know, is part of the Second Amendment. It's about, having a well-regulated militia, which is, it says right there, is essential for our defense. And so, that it's not just about, the authority to own guns or weapons. It's about having a militia. And I talked to our sheriff about this recently, and we've got an awesome sheriff. I mean, he is tremendous, and there are great sheriffs all over the country, and I think that's a part of God's provision. They are actually the number one law enforcement authority in every county of the country, the sheriff. Constitutionally, it's the only one elected to that. Now, there are some places that may elect their other chiefs, but generally that's the only elected law enforcement official. I think around the country, at least 2/3 of the sheriffs now really understand their constitutional authority and responsibility, and they're already starting to mobilize militias for defense.
Are you serious? That's going on.
Yeah, that is going on. You saw it happen in Virginia. How fast did that happen when they said, we're coming to take your guns? Almost every sheriff in Virginia said they mobilized their own militia. Some of them deputized everybody with a concealed carry permit. They said, no, you're not coming here and taking these. That is not going to happen here. And it was a tremendous response. And remember, you talk about they showed up in the Capitol. 20-some thousand showed up armed with their ARs in Virginia, in Richmond, in my own old hometown, and said, you're not going to take our guns. And the sheriffs were behind them. The law enforcement were saying to the governor and everybody else, we are not going to enforce these unconstitutional laws you're putting out. Well, I tell you, that was a wake-up call to many others all over the country, many of whom have been awake for a long time preparing for this. But I think it ramped up and sped up what I think is God's provision for a lot of what is going to unfold. He has seeded our country with wise leaders, mostly on local levels. He seeded our country with many former veterans of the Afghanistan wars and the Iraq wars that would, I think where they're trained in urban warfare and things like that.
Let's hold that thought right there, Rick. This is so stimulating. I got the clock is closing in on me. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to want to stay tuned for part 2 of Firewall this week with our special guest, Rick Joyner. And we are talking right now about the news behind the news and the news before it happens. It's fascinating. So we'll be looking forward, Rick, to doing part 2. And Chelsea and team, I want to continue this because I can tell right now that God's doing something special. So thank you guys for watching Firewall.
Lance Wallnau has just released his latest book, God's Chaos Code.
You need to know the code. You need to know what's happening right now. There is a code in the chaos. There's a purpose in the shaking. Once you see this, it's going to give stability and strength to you. God is literally raising up an awakening generation right now. It's hidden in the code.
You need to know the code. Order God's Chaos Code now at godschaoscode.com.
You know, people are always asking me, how do we get in touch with you? Or how do we find out about what you're doing and broadcast? Well, here's the fastest way to do it. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. And we have podcasts that are available on Google Play and on Apple iTunes. So remember, it's Lance Wallnau. The spelling's a little strange, W-A-L-L-N-A-U. And we're available on all the platforms you could possibly want. Just check us out.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Firewall with Lance Wallnau. For more information, visit